In this lesson, we're going to be creating our vignettes and then using that vignette to make a closing, and we'll also add some grain overall. Okay, so what I want to do now is add that vignette, and I'm just going to do it in another comp just to make everything a little bit easier to work with. So I'm going to select all of my layers. Make sure you don't have anything locked that you want to be part of this pre-comp. So we'll unlock all of those. And then we'll hit Control-Shift-C, and we'll call this All Moving Layers. And that is a lot nicer to look at, just not having to worry about all of those other pieces. Now let's go ahead and add some vignettes. So I'm going to start out using just kind of that black color, sort of a really, really dark blue color like what we have here. So come up here, go to Layer, New, Solid, and we'll just color pick that really dark blue. Then we can come up here, grab our ellipse tool, and if you just double click the ellipse tool, it'll give you a mask already, so you don't have to draw it out. Then we'll just invert that, and we can maybe expand it a little and add some feather. And just keep kind of working on that till you get that looking the way you want it to be. I'm going to turn down the opacity a bit. And instead of having it so blue, I feel like it's really obvious how blue it is. I'm going to go into the layer solid settings and make this just a little bit darker. So just pull that a little closer to black. It's still blue, but just a little closer to black. Now I want to create another vignette that's going to be the yellow color that we use. So I'll just duplicate the one we already have with that dark blue. And then let's scrub forward to a time when we have that yellow color just on screen. And I want this one to be underneath the darker one. So I'm going to choose that lower dark royal blue solid in the stacking order. And we'll just come up to Layer, Solid Settings, and color pick that gold color. So you can see how now this looks a little bit more brown. But I want to change the size of the mask. So I'm going to pull this in a little bit on the sides and just give it a little bit more variation from that darker one. And let's turn down the opacity of this one as well. So we'll go into our mask options and turn that opacity down just a bit. Okay, so this is looking good. Now I want to add one more that's going to go on the very bottom that'll be this teal color. So again, we'll just select the yellow one we created, hit Control D, grab the lower one, go to our solid settings, and just color pick that blue color. And this one I want to be very, very light. So I'll come in and turn that mask opacity way down. So it's closer to the brown than the blue. And then let's pull this one in a lot farther, just maybe kind of halfway in between right here. So we'll really be able to see lots of color variation throughout the whole piece. Really nice. If you wanted to, maybe turn up the opacity just a little bit on the yellow if you want to make it look a little more brown. So I think that looks really nice. And these pieces that kind of extend all the way over to the side, you can really start to see that extension just kind of over everything. Maybe turn up the opacity a little bit on our darker piece, just to make those corners a little bit darker. Perfect. Okay, so now what I want to do is come all the way to the end, and I want to animate in the masks so that they kind of close out and we sort of get that old-timey movie feel. So I'm going to move back just right about here where the fish starts to go away, and we'll pull this up, and let's set keyframes for all of our mask expansions. And we'll go all the way to the end here, and the black one, or the really dark one, is the one I'm most concerned with. But I want the other ones to expand as well. So we're going to expand these inwards. And I'm just going to do it until I don't see the white in the middle at all anymore. And I'm going to solo this yellow one, and we'll do the same thing until we don't see the black in the middle. And then also the same for the teal. You can solo that one just so you're able to tell what layer it is. Let's go ahead and toggle that transparency. And this one's so light that it's kind of hard to tell, but that's probably pretty good right about there. So now I'm going to unsolo those. And now what I want to do is change the transparency or the opacity of the black mask or the really dark mask over time. So we'll go ahead and set a keyframe for that. Just take that back over here and then turn that up to 100. Perfect. So you can see kind of how that closes out. Let's just watch a RAM preview of that last part. So I'm going to hit the B key and the 0 key on my number pad.
A reef. A reef.
Great. So I think that looks really nice, and we could add some easy ease to those first keys. So let's select that, go to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease, and that'll just make that a little bit less abrupt. We can do that for other two layers as well. Just adding some easy ease to make the whole thing feel a little more polished. Okay, so I think that looks really nice. And overall, I think everything's looking just great. Now let's go back over to our project panel, go into our graphics folder, and we have that lensflare.png. Now this is going to, again, just help to add a little bit of color overall. So I'm going to drop this beneath those vignettes, and you can see it's really bright right now. So I'm going to change the blending mode. You can just click Toggle Switches Modes, and I'm going to change it to Add. Now, that's a little bit extreme. You can see that it really makes a huge difference, but I'm going to turn it down just by hitting the T key. We'll turn this down just so it's at about 25%. So it's very subtle. And then I'm going to animate it across time. So it'll start over here on the left. Let's bring up the position value for it by hitting the P key. And we'll go all the way to the end and animate this over to the other side. So over time, that color will change from being more orange on the left and having more blue on the right. You can see really well in this piece, just you get a lot more of a range of color by adding that very subtle effect there. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is add grain on top of all of this, and that's going to be affecting my vignettes as well as the lens flare. So I'm going to pre-compose everything else. And we'll just hit Control-Shift-C to do that with all those layers selected. And we'll call this Lens Flare and Vignettes. And then we'll go ahead and open back up our Effects and Presets panel and just type in Grain. It'll be the Add Grain option. And I always like to turn this up to Final Output because on something this small, it's really hard to tell what you've got going on. Now I'm going to zoom in to 100%. Let's just look at this area here so we can see what's happening. Okay, so I'm not going to use a preset, but I do want to change just kind of what these values are. Now I usually leave the intensity at 1 because it already gets pretty intense. And let's turn the size down a little bit and turn the softness up. And maybe just add a little bit to that aspect ratio. So that's just going to pull it sideways a bit more. So very, very subtle grain. It's mostly noticeable here at the end when we have the black screen. But sometimes where we have those really solid pieces in the center, it's pretty visible. So really, really nice. Give yourself a pat on the back. You made it all the way to the end. And just good luck in creating your own infographics and animating them just using some of the techniques that we learned here today.